Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. Welcome to the fourth ever Open Forum. For those of you that are new here or new to GreyNoise or new to us, or if you're not, welcome back. But these are sessions that we do, at a semi regular cadence, usually twice a year, sometimes more, sometimes less, to get to meet our user base, tell you about all the cool things that we're working on, talk about fun and controversial research topics, and hear from you guys. So without further ado, we are going to get into the noise, which is our title for this. So first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Supriya. I'm the Senior Community Manager at GreyNoise. I have Jordan here with me and Michael here with me, who are part of the community team. If you are not already intimately familiar with them, I hope that you soon become. So Jordan is another community manager supporting general community stuff with me. And Michael is our product specialist, helping all of you folks with all of your burning product questions. And then we also have Bob and Kimber, if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
I am Bob Rudis. I am, what am I? In charge of data science and research and a whole bunch of other stuff. Now GreyNoise, it's a great place. Y'all should buy our stuff.
That's true.
Wonderful. I'm Kimber Duke. I'm one of the product managers at GreyNoise, formerly on the research team. So I've got that security background and bringing you awesome product stuff from GreyNoise.
Amazing. Thanks, y'all. And we also have a ton of other GreyNoise. In fact, I believe we have most of the company here in with us today. So, we've got our folks on the sales team, obviously our customer success representatives, Brad and Blair. If you have any questions at any point, you can fully expect Brad and or Blair to jump in long before we have a chance to and answer them. But always feel free to drop questions in the chat. And so this is the agenda we have for you guys today. We just did introductions. We're going to give a high level review of what we do, just because we have some new folks in the room with us. And then Bob is going to give us a very fun and exciting presentation of mass exploits. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our advanced intelligence package that you may or may not have heard of. We're very excited to talk about it. And then finally, we'll wrap up with questions, cheeky banter, whatever folks want and desire. So without further ado, I am going to talk about us. Oh, yes. Tragically, Andrew Morris is down with whatever sickness Andrew contracted at wherever place Andrew was. So he sadly isn't joining us today, but he sends his regards. And if you know how bummed he was about missing this, you obviously know Andrew very well. And to also, we have a new VP of product. Jen's picture isn't up here, but Jen Andre recently joined us at GreyNoise. He literally cried. Jen Andre joined us at GreyNoise. She's the new VP of product. She's here watching in the background because it's her second week at GreyNoise. But everyone give Jen a really warm welcome. And if you have anything that you want to see from GreyNoise, you can ask any of us, but you can also ask Jen directly. I'm sure she'd love that. So amazing. And without further ado, Bob, I'm going to pass it over to you. This obviously slide was made in advance. This is not Andrew Morris. This is Bob Rudis, but he's going to talk about how GreyNoise works.
Yeah, and there's no slides for me. So I think most everybody here knows what we do and how it works. But for those of you, we have his slides. I didn't look through his slides. I'm still just going to talk, probably not point to the slides. So we have an amazing, massive amount of sensors all across the internets. And I just need to take a quick second to go. That's actually one of the big reasons why I came here too. I cannot believe how awesome this technical team is for what they've managed to do to manage this many sensors across so many diverse networks. They're just all phenomenal. This is one of the best teams ever out there. So we have these out there, and they all have different personalities that we can apply to them to pretend to be anything that we want them to be. And one of the things our amazing research team does, and I have to tell you, Kimber is still on the research team, whether she thinks she is or not. They spend a lot of their time crafting, lovingly handcrafting those, and trying to get ahead of them. And I'm going to talk about that towards the end of my talk too, about getting ahead of some of the vulnerabilities. And what we do with these things is we watch for folks coming at this, and we don't just we watch everything. So we see everything that comes at these nodes, and we've actually done a bunch of blog posts about different kinds of traffic that we see. But we spend a lot of time both creating these tags, watching what people are doing with these tags, and then assigning attributes to those folks. Like, are they malicious oriented? Are they a generic scanner, etc.? And what we can then do with that is tell you all the activity going on. How many IPs? How often are they doing it? What are they doing? Do they do other things? And this is really, really cool stuff, not just because it's cool to do, like that'd be great to do it because it would be just cool to do, but it helps defenders get ahead of all of this garbage on the internet, these mass exploits that we see all the time. And what we can do with this is you can look at it to do like threat hunting as a one. I actually like to do that. Like if I have like 5 minutes throughout the day, I love going into the visualizer platform, seeing what new stuff is coming out there, and just start digging around for, hey, what is this IP address doing? What's it been doing? That's because I don't actually actively defend GreyNoise. We have Reed, awesome Reed to go do that. But defenders and organizations, when you're seeing stuff come at you, you can double check to see whether it's coming just at you or that's coming at the entire internet by going to our platform and double checking the IP addresses. That's one of the best uses of it out there. So you can focus on something, or if it's just like some lame Mirai thing going after everything that's out there, that hopefully you've all patched for those things. We also have this other really highly curated data set called it's called Riot, but actually it's Common Business Services. I have to tell you, like, it took I think 2 months ago is when I actually figured out what Riot actually stood for, because like I just didn't look for it out there. I just knew it was Common Business Services. That's also great too, because you get to identify things that you probably shouldn't block. The stuff that we actually identify as malicious, you can generally block that pretty well. Like, we update that list every hour for some of the bad things that are out there. So if you know you have Citrix, or you know you have any one of these other kinds of technologies that have had a recent or long-standing vulnerability, and you want to protect yourself from things going against those, you can use those block lists to do that. We actually have a lot of partners that use that, bake that into their technology too. But you can also just say, hey, these are Common Business Services, probably don't want to disrupt access to those. And I'm going to caveat that a little bit. So like, we do catalog all the Common Business Services. We do grab that information and process that every 8 hours as well too. I do think you do need to be a bit more careful about just allowing access to all of the Common Business Services. Things like GitHub Actions, sure, they're benign, but they're also kind of malicious these days. So take that list and use that, as your discretion to be able to do it. So we give you things to block, we give you things to allow, we give you ways to dig into the system as well. I know the product folks are going to talk about some of the really core things. I'm not going to like steal their thunder from later as well too. So we have all these things together, and these are just great tools to use if you're a SOC analyst or incident responder, threat hunter, firewall admin, or vulnerability manager. These are resources that you can use to defend the organization, get a feeling for what's up, know what's happening out there, and be able to communicate this exploitation activity to the folks inside your organization, so they can reliably give you time to patch. They can give you the freedom to patch, or they can give you the freedom to mitigate. It really does help a lot, and it's helped a lot of orgs get a handle on all of this craziness that you're going to see that we have to deal with every year.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. So obviously we have the slide. And if you have any questions about the fundamentals of GreyNoise, if you are a customer, Brad and Hilaire are there to support you. And if you're a community user, Jordan, Michael, and I are here to talk you through anything you might need or want from us. So Bob, I'm gonna stop sharing, hand it over to you so that we can get into celebrity vulnerabilities from 2022. It's still 2022. Just for a little bit longer.
It is just a longer. And Ryan, I will speak slower. I tend to talk fast, and I just moved the mic closer, so I shouldn't actually be cutting in and out anymore too. So I recovered there, Ryan. All right, let me do this share screen, and I'm going to assume that you can see that intro slide. Awesome.
Yes, we can.
So I got to move my GreyNoise fam over here so I can see you guys too, and I'm going to move this around so I can actually see what's going on. All right, so this is, we have this thing coming out. It's a really neat new, I think, if I'm not wrong, GreyNoise fam, this is our first ever like major report thing we've put out. Is that right?
That is correct.
So this is our first report that we're putting out. Yeah, you may know me from the past. Like I have a thing, like I write reports. It's a thing. I'm getting better, but like I'm still a thing. This is a great report. So some folks that you're seeing on the screen, some folks that are actually in the chat, all contributed to this. So our amazing researchers, and I use that word a lot because they are, they take a look back at the significant vulnerabilities that GreyNoise itself took a lot of interest in for the previous year. It's their lens, it's their view, it's their voice, and you get to really peek into the minds of what they thought about these things, how they went about looking at these things, and like what are some of the impacts of the vulnerabilities that we did. There's not a lot of them, so they're in bite-sized chunks. So in between posting pictures of your animals in holiday attire, you can like read a section, post a picture, read a section. It'd be great. We also have a section that covers the CISA known exploited vulnerabilities. I call it KEV. How that performed last year, what it did to you folks as defenders out there. I think it's an interesting look at like what you have to deal with when it comes to being notified about things that are actually being exploited in the wild. And that's CISA's take, and we have our take on that as well too. So I am not going to ruin the surprise of what's inside this report today. What we're going to say is we're going to go beyond just our tags ecosystem. Like our tags ecosystem is great. It's very refined. It's really precise. It's all stuff that actually really, really matters to orgs, and the stuff that you should care about. But they're not the only vulnerabilities that are out there. There's this other class of vulnerabilities called celebrity vulnerabilities. They might be called designer vulnerabilities for some folks. You might have other really bad names that I won't say for them too. These are the fancy ones. They got really weird, odd names. Usually, sometimes, as you'll see, they have a logo. They may even have like a fancy, like their own custom domain website. And they're celebrity and not like maybe really critical vulnerabilities, because like celebrities, they actually may be kind of worthless human beings, or worthless vulnerabilities, and they rise to fame, but they're kind of nothing burgers, like a lot of them are. So we're going to talk about some of that and like what that actually means for defenders. And before I go through all this, I want to acknowledge Mike Sass, or AKA Shell Sharks. Those are links you can go to there. That's a fancy, you should read about like how he does that logo too. It's phenomenal. If you might remember, if anyone that followed what GreyNoise was doing around Log4j last year, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We're not talking about Log4j a lot, just a little bit. You might have noticed there was one really cool slide that they had, and it talked about basically all the vulnerability history and like all these celebrity vulnerabilities. Like Mike maintains a list of these things. He does yeoman's work at that. Like it's not fun maintaining lists like that. Maintaining lists of any kind is not great. He's curated all that. So we just kind of riff off of that one for this particular report and some fun stuff that we have. And I'm just going to dig into it, right? So as most folks probably also know, if you know me at all, I'm more like, hey, let's go visualize and make pretty charts and like, communicate stuff from data science more than like dig into models and things like that. You have to communicate things for people to understand them. So I've got charts. Of course, I have charts. I guarantee you that the QR code at the bottom right is not malicious. You don't have to take my word for it. You can run it through a URL checker. It's fine. It's just going to that URL that's there, so you don't have to type it. That's all it is. And so the top part is a calendar view of of the vulnerabilities that Mike has curated. Now we've taken his list of celebrity vulns that goes all the way back to 1999, filtered it just for ones that have CVEs, just because it's easier to talk about if they have CVEs. And I also really hate vulnerabilities that don't have CVEs. I think it makes it really hard for defenders. We're increasingly seeing that be a thing too, like not having CVEs. Certain large companies that I'm going to like make fun of during this also are kind of doing that on the bandwagon. So we're trying to just focus on things that might be meaningful, that have actual legit data behind them. And what's neat is it goes all the way back to 1999. Like, yes, we had a celebrity vulnerability in 1999. What that top chart also should show you is that there's been a number of years when the velocity and volume of celebrity vulnerabilities has been really small and like pretty easy to deal with, and probably didn't have to deal with them at all for some of them were. But then it also kind of shows like it's been terrible. It's just been crushing a couple of years for defenders out there. And that's also one reason why I wanted to walk through this in here. At the one below is what's like a fishbone timeline chart. What that URL takes you to is an interactive version of that. Just keep scrolling, and like it's interactive. You can click on the things to get the links and everything down there. This is just the past 2 years of vulnerabilities from Mike's data set in that fishbone style. And overall, there's 277 as of today vulnerabilities in like CVE related celebrity vulnerabilities in that data set that he curates. And that's crazy. That's a lot of vulnerabilities. And like that pace that you can see it on there is also kind of crazy too. So if you have questions about any of the vulnerabilities or some of the ones I'm not going to talk about or whatever, drop them in the chat. Like I can get to them async, or we can get to them async. You can hit us up on the community Slack. You can hit us up on Twitter. We'll be glad to answer them anyway out there. So we're not going to cover all of the vulnerabilities from every single year, because this would be like a 6-hour presentation, and I don't want that, and nobody wants that out there as well. One note of thing when you do the interactive is the link rot is also real in cybersecurity. I'm not sure if anyone's ever looked through the NVD data set. But the NVD data set, like, basically they curate a bunch of URLs for all of the different vulns that they have published in there. The link rot in there is terrible. And the link rot in Mike's data set is also really bad. So some of the URLs are kind of flaky. So just, it's not the viz, it's that. So with that, let's kind of dig in. The very first CVE catalog celebrity vulnerability is something called Pizza Thief. That was launched way back in 1999. And I think it kind of shows a little bit how far we've come and not come. In this whole, like, how do we do vulnerability disclosure? How do we talk about vulnerabilities? How do we explain like the severity and likelihood of vulnerabilities there are to folks out there? This was released on a mailing list, like a lot of things back in the day were, and some things still today are. And this is a passive FTP denial of service and/or improper access vulnerability, right? And so my first thought, like, as digging back to here, it's like, wow, FTP, like, I have not used like an FTP like command line thing like in like ages. It doesn't work in any browser anymore either. And I have this feeling that there's probably some people young enough on this webinar that you've never used FTP before. So FTP is what we old people used to use to transfer files back in the day. Now you have all these other fancy protocols to do that. FTP was everywhere, and if you ask the Rapid7 folks or the Census folks for the list of FTP servers, there's a bunch. There's still people still do use it. It is still a viable means. This was just a interesting vulnerability where this one particular side of FTP would basically, if you could get, like, after someone made the initial connection, if you could slide in there before them, you could basically get access to all that data. And it's just interesting, that like that vulnerability existed back then. The link at the bottom is actually a link from 2013 from a vendor who was actually finding this vulnerability still exploitable in 2013 because people just hadn't cared or patched it and everything out there. People generally don't patch. We'll talk about patching later too. And I just think this is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, there's that, if you read it, there's this squishy, this is a medium severity vulnerability. I think that's hilarious because that's where things were back in 1999. What I love about now is that we have all these refined ways and more sciencey ways to describe like the threat likelihood and threat capability and all that kind of stuff with this out there. So it's really kind of neat that we've evolved a little bit since then. But yeah, at the same time, like it still shows that we have a long way to come as we'll see with stuff that's out there. So we start with Pizza Thief, the singular celebrity vulnerability of 1999. Then we have to jump all the way over to 2003 to get to the next one. So we had, like, can you imagine if we only had like one massive vulnerability like every few years? Well, I guess we wouldn't have jobs at GreyNoise if that was a thing. So maybe it's okay that we have bad ones every year, but it'd be great. Like defenders would love it, right? It'd be awesome. And I really liked this one. I remember this one from back in the day too. One reason why I like this one is that At Stake tried to do this, and I really wish that they had managed to succeed. I wish everyone just did this. This is a phenomenal PDF report. Like, you should grab it, you should read it. It's not, this thing isn't real anymore. It's not going to hurt anybody. You might be able to find some old piece of equipment that this has a problem with. And this was like basically Ethernet frame padding handling weaknesses, right? So like how it deals with the thing. That's not the cool part. Like the vuln isn't like that. Like it's got a name, like, so it makes it celebrity. But this report is really refined. Like it's almost as good as like what you would get from like a Google Scholar thing for something like modern days. It's like outlined really well, professionally developed, published. Everything's great about this. And like we've sort of taken a little bit, like people with blog posts today have taken some of the characteristics from this and kind of replicated them in like blog posts and other ways they drop vulnerabilities now. But I can, like, this is like the first really published vulnerability and thing that's out there. And I think this is like one of those ones to hallmark and emulate from if we can actually go do that. The vulnerability itself is really boring. We're not going to talk about the vulnerability. We have to jump all the way to 2009 after that. I would seriously, like, we could all get a lot of stuff done if we didn't have to worry about that. And this is the era when the all caps celebrity vulnerabilities started to become a thing. I think some of that stems from the fact that like these things were probably dealt with from like the gov side of things, and for some reason either like keyboards were broken and all they have is all caps in government or whatever. But like the reality is like we now have all caps for everything as a result of this. And this one is Educated Scholar, and I am going to rag. If anyone works for Microsoft, I'm actually not apologizing for it. I'm just warning you. You might want to like not watch this because I'm not going to be very kind to Microsoft. So this is one of the many voluminous, multitudinal problems with Microsoft's garbage operating system and their garbage SMB service, right? And this is like a lot of vulnerabilities. Like if you just read through all the vulns that come out, it's improperly processing input, right? Like that's what a lot of the vuln categories are out there. And this is their own protocol and their own stuff, and they couldn't even get it right back then, and they still can't get it right now. And this was like the beginning of the SMB to RCE, or remote code execution, that still goes today, right? Across many CVEs that we're going to like scroll through really quickly on here. And it just feels like Microsoft doesn't care. It almost feels like we should have vulnerabilities, Microsoft, because then we could sell security services, but I didn't say that out loud. The other reason why I'm focused, I just kind of paused on this one for a minute. If you you might remember hearing the Educated Scholar from the Shadow Brokers drop. You probably all forgotten about the Shadow Brokers drop from a few years ago. This actually made it into that leak. And is one of the actual vulnerabilities that was used by nation states all across the world to break into organizations and do whatever nation states and bad people do. So this was the beginning of like, hey, this is there, and like we have a shadowy group later on, and we have all caps, and like we're setting ourselves up for some fun years to come, right? But again, we're one vulnerability a year. One. This is so cool. So we jump ahead a few years. And this is they're all caps, of course, and it's Beast. And I'm focusing on it. I was going to skip over it, but I had to. It's almost got a logo because that's what was published back in the day by news sites regarding it. That wasn't a logo, but that was how it got like characterized by the media. And this was kind of neat. What I liked about this one is they did take time to go, this is really tough to do. And I think that's one thing that we try to make sure we communicate when we're looking at tags and talking about vulnerabilities in this modern era, and especially at GreyNoise. We try to make sure that you understand, hey, this is really, really hard. Like you might not have to like do that patch now thing. And I'll be talking about patch now later. But you know, they actually took time to actually go do that, which is awesome, because knowing you have time, knowing that you might not, like the attackers might not be able to do something, is actually pretty cool. The other thing that this also started to do in terms of like how we look at vulnerabilities now is like they started to talk about scope. It's easy right now to scan the internet. Like everybody scans the internet. Even we scan it to a little degree. We don't talk about it a whole lot. To talk about the amount of exposure that this had as well too. So I like the evolution that we're seeing with this, even though it's still a celebrity vulnerability. We're getting more and more things right. We're adding more into the vulnerability discussion to give defenders a way to do some of that triage. But what this one thing also did do is it committed what I consider one of the only unpardonable sins in cybersecurity. There are a few, but this is one of them. It said patch, basically in essence, if you read it, it says patch now. Despite the fact that it's hard to do, hard to exploit, you should patch now. And I hate that because organizations can't patch now. Like they just can't. And I think hopefully everybody here realizes that by now. It's a terrible thing to say. It doesn't help the situation at all. And 11 years later from this one, you'll still be hearing that mantra out on the internets everywhere for vulns that drop. It's just not helpful. And this is kind of one of the places where it actually started from out there. Kind of fast forwarding a little bit, a couple more years, so we still have some time. And this is only 3. Look at this, 3. We went from 1 to 3. This is great. Like it's still manageable. Again, all caps, and this is a duo. The Crime Time, and technically Crime came out the year before, but they get lumped together, so it got stuck into 2013. I didn't put the date mark on it. This was neat because the Black Hat talk, which is on there, the links are there as a little synopsis on there. You should definitely like read through the slides, and if you can find the video, you should definitely look at the video. It's a great talk. This is neat because it's yet another SSL. So Beast was SSL TLS. SSL TLS is yet another problem in this core thing that runs the internet, right? And what I loved about this one, and I'm just spending a couple seconds on it, but more than I probably should, is this was a time, much simpler time, is when they actually bothered to note in the disclosure and in the talk that, hey, there's not a lot of SSL on the internet anyway, so it doesn't matter. And like that's totally not true today, right? Like it's SSL everywhere, which I'm not going to get on my bandwagon about that. This focused on a weakness in the compression of SSL. That's what the crime did. On the time side, they were like, hey, there isn't a lot of SSL on the internet. Is there a compression weakness somewhere else that we can do? And they actually said, sure, so one's a compression weakness and one's a timing weakness for compression on the HTTP response side of the house out there. So it's a great talk. It talks about like both sides of that. And I just think looking back on simpler times, like 8 years ago, when the internet was still kind of young and open and free and not with this let's encrypt craziness that's out there. So now we bring us to a more recent year, 2014, and this really begins the annual cycle of celebrity vulnerabilities. I think everyone here probably knows those two names like the back of their hand. And I call this year the rise of the logo vulns because I think it's going to click. I knew it was going to do that. Sorry about that. The rise of the logo vulns, because we got logos. This is the year when like the logo stuff just got crazy. It was just silly and dumb. And this is also the year when like the tech media and cyber media hype cycle stuff for this, it just got out of control, and it hasn't gotten any better since then. So like, and this is terrible. So this year, all this stuff was in the news. Defenders got blasted with it from every side. It actually made it to the real news, not just the news that a lot of us follow, which means all the business folks inside the org were getting scared and worried about these things, and everyone had to take time to explain stuff to them. It was just terrible. They had to scramble. This was something that was pervasive. The researchers were very helpful in letting attackers know that 66% of all Apache and Nginx servers deployed had this weakness like in them exposed. Really helpful, so that the attackers knew that they should just go do things. It doesn't matter so much now. Attackers just do everything now. And this was bad. Like Heartbleed was really bad. I'm not sure if anyone was in an org at that time with this, but lots of healthcare organizations, lots of businesses, millions of people lost, like their data was exposed, passwords were exposed. This was really bad. Like you basically could hit a web server and get random bits of memory, and it was not so random for a lot of these web servers. It was pretty bad. Shell shock was also one where this began a series of vulnerabilities in how you pass stuff to Linux shells. And we all know that developers do a great job of sanitizing human input before they pass it off to the operating system shell function. Operating system shells to execute commands. Well, they do an awesome job of that. It never happens anymore. This was taking advantage of some funkiness with how various shells parse various things, but we're also seeing this now too. Like it sparked interest in other researchers to go poke at how this might affect other things, and we still see this class of vulnerabilities now as well too. So what I like about this era is, like, what I hate about it is that it caused chaos. What I like about it though is it really got the curiosity of a lot of researchers who started poking at other things so that they could make those things safer as well too, right? So like that creativity begets other creativity. I just wish it wouldn't beget logos and websites, because I don't think they're very helpful. On following year, more logos, more all caps, more special websites, because this is the thing now. Actually, and maybe it isn't a thing now, but it was a thing actually back then. There was a lot to pick from this year, so I've actually cherry picked just a couple on here. First of all, the Ghost logo. I'm not talking about Ghost. I have it on there because I'm wearing you can't see it, but I'm wearing our Ghosts t-shirt that was made for our little event. Stop chasing ghosts. And the other ones are kind of interesting though. Rowhammer I have on here because I think we forget about the hardware vulnerabilities too much, and we don't actually put pressure on folks like Intel and other places that make chipsets to do a better job with these things. So Rowhammer caused this was like in chip thing. It required firmware updates, which means taking systems down. When you applied the fix, if you applied the fix, it also destroyed performance on your system and like caused power consumption to go through the roof. This is terrible. Like we need the hardware people to take way more care about these things, and they don't. And they still don't today. And I kind of really wish we had software and hardware liability laws. I'm in somewhat of the minority of that one, but I think it would do a lot of good if people were put onto that. Stage fright was also cool because this was one of the first, like, hey, I'm going to send you an SMS and I'm going to take over your phone or DOS your phone. And it's always fun to have those vulnerabilities, right, in like the thing that we all carry in our pockets every single day. So this was a year when like the core weaknesses in hardware and just common things just got really exposed in a pretty big way. But developers, please stop trusting input from humans. We suck. Don't do that. If you're a developer, please don't do that. The hits just keep on coming in the next year, right? So more all caps, of course, because we have to do all caps. I do like Sloth. I'm not going to read all the text in there. You can do that. You can click on it and dig into it. I like this though, because the researchers didn't hit out a particular software platform or call or like, you know, diss a particular vendor. This was, hey, people designing protocols, do better. And if there's anyone on here who does security research for a living, like you probably know that RFCs are your best source for poundage, right? Like if you just implement something that is faithful to the RFC and you as a client and you go hit a server, there's a good chance you're going to knock the server over or get something because server implementers aren't the greatest like developers in the world. And the image magic, I have the image magic one here because it's just an awesome phone logo. I just love that logo. I mean, it's the image magic logo with just a little thing, but I think they did a cool job with that. I had this on here just to raise awareness, and I think most people that are on here understand this, but like image magic is used by like hundreds of thousands of business processes out there, like across like, you know, for millions of users to do things like process like images that come from the internet or to convert faxes to various image formats or vice versa. There's a whole class of those kind of conversion programs that people do keep hitting with particular vulnerabilities, because if you can actually send a malicious document into someone that's doing document processing, you get really good access for things. And I think we forget about that a lot. So I like it when the researchers are focused on those things because it does enable us to be a bit safer in all the data that people are handling for us out there. I am not talking about this slide at all, except for the fact that you kind of know that this year was a really, really, really bad. 2017 was like one of the worst years in cyber. Just it's one Eternal Blue begets okay, all caps, website, etc. Spectre, I'll get more hardware stuff. But like so much damage got caused by this. I do not want to spend a whole lot of time on here. You all know how bad it was, WannaCry, etc. Terrible year. There was also a bunch of other things out there as well too. It was just a terrible year for defenders that year. Going one more year, we have continued all caps. We also have the continued use of the Geddon. So the Drupal Geddon was a thing just before this, and it continued. Like we have Drupal Geddon. I think now every Drupal vulnerability is like another permutation on the Geddon out there, because I don't know, it's lack of creativity or you just liked it so you're riffing off of it. I have no idea, but I would appreciate more creativity by the researchers. This bleeding bit though was another one of those like, hey, this is in everywhere. So this is Texas Instruments Bluetooth low energy like chipsets that were basically in everything. I'm calling this one out because this was also in the media. The media loved this one. There was tons of articles about it. It's Bluetooth. It's local. You need to be in proximity to me for this to work. That is not mass exploitation at all. Yet it got so many headlines, it drew so much attention. Defenders had to explain this in organizations, and auditors are really kind of dumb with regard to have you patch this, but like it's just silly. It's a vuln. It's legit. I'm glad the researchers found it. I'm glad that it's been patched by TI, but at the same time, like the celebrity vulnerability does not help. Like the hype does not help. Please stop talking about it out there, media folks. So besides the all caps, like you've seen the all caps thing throughout this whole thing, they also riff off names like the Geddon, like I said before. But we get to this year and you can see like there's just a ton of like the volume and just speed of these things coming out is just crazy. This was a really, really bad year in terms of the number of them. Not all of them were that useful. We had someone that built off the previous Poodle attack from another year to cause Zombie Poodle because, you know, we have to have cute names that make no sense that people make fun of us for. But like this volume is untenable. Like people had to look at each one of these things, see if it worked, was part of their enterprise, maybe deal with it if they had to deal with it. This pace of just celebrity vulnerabilities, let alone like the actual like day-to-day CVEs that you have to deal with, is really, really untenable. It is not helpful for defenders. It's just not something that that can be sustained moving forward. And I included Citrix on there just because it's a really funny name, and Citrix probably think about naming itself that instead of that, given how bad their stuff is. Oh, and also yet more Microsoft fun, as we all know from those things. We're getting close to the end, and the 2020 was also another brutal year. It just gets worse like from that there. I would also just please, moving forward, no more Eternals. It was a bad movie. The comics were horrible. And like the naming scheme is old. So just no more Eternals. Terrible. Just don't do that. Ping of death in 2020 too. Like seriously, like vendors who write software and hardware, like can we just not have simple tiny packets break systems moving forward? 2020 still happened. That's what this is. Like why? This is why we can't have nice things, because we can't even like get like we can't even protect ourselves from single packets. It's just crazy out there. Finally getting closer to the end. 2021, as you all know, was a really bad year. There was one big thing that happened that year, which I guess I will get that going on here. So one thing was Exchange, Orange Sai, maniac, research maniac, just awesome finds. Also all the things there, because Exchange can't seem to actually patch anything, caused lots of problems for lots of folks that are out there. We also had some little thing, Log4Shell, tiny, didn't cause a lot of problem. No one had it. It was just something. Oh no, but as you know, it was pretty bad. I don't need to talk about Log4Shell, but this year of like dealing with back-to-back Exchange woes on top of all the other things, and then you have the Log4Shell and all the proxies, like, which related to that too. Like this pace, and like 2021 might have been one of the worst years for defenders in terms of celebrity vulnerabilities and real things that they had to deal with on a regular basis. And finally, we get to 2022. And this is it's a crushing pace this year. It hasn't let up at all. Although what I will have to say is we had more what I will call serious vulnerabilities, like the ones that we talked about in the report that I mentioned way at the beginning of this one. Serious ones, no logos, no websites, really good information that are out there. We still have problems in core things like TLS and SSL. Great, we haven't fixed that. We also can't seem to like not riff off of old names like with bleed at the end or for shell at the end. So creativity still lacks in the researcher space. So you guys could get better at naming things moving forward. But really this year, not many things stood out like from like the celebrity side of the house. They did on like the real side of the house, but not on the celebrity side. So I'm hoping that sure, we can have as many logo and celebrity bones next year as people want. Just let's keep the pace of like the things that actually matter kind of slow and infrequent, and maybe actually like build better things. Before I go, or before I pass it on, I pass on the baton, I would just love to take 2 seconds, 10 seconds to shout out to Horizon 3. I don't know if anyone's on the call here. This was phenomenal collaboration with our research team. They gave a heads up for some research they were working on. They helped the research team craft an amazingly exquisite tag that finds all the exploitation attempts for this Fortinet bug. And we would just encourage other folks to be more like Horizon 3. We do not share secrets with anybody else. We will gladly take your bug reports coming in before you actually do the responsible disclosure, get ahead of it with a tag so that when you do your drop, the defenders can also be protected from that. Like they'll be able to see when exploitation starts happening. They can have block lists right away, have taken care of it. We would be glad to work with you on any of those things. This was a phenomenal collaboration. It got ahead of the mass exploitation, helps make everybody safer. It's a win-win for every single person out there. So finally, 2023, what does it have in store? Well, I guarantee more logos. I guarantee more all caps. I guarantee more reuse, like tired reuse of names. But I'm hoping that maybe we might learn some lessons from the previous years. Maybe the pace won't be nearly as bad. I'm doubtful of that, and I think you'll be seeing us talk about more mass exploitation throughout the year, both from celebrity vulnerabilities and from traditional vulnerabilities that we deal with out there as well too. So I just want to get Mike Sass, thank you very much for maintaining this list, and we will be taking all new updates to Mike's list and adding it to the data set, which there is an actual full data set at that link I gave you earlier. So if you want the data behind these and not just have to scrape Mike's site like I do, you can get that from there too. We'll be updating it. You can keep scrolling and we'll be adding more stuff to that as well too. So thank you all for your time.
Amazing, Bob. Thank you so much. And folks, if you have questions for Bob, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can DM them to him. Or you can hold them and ask them live, whatever that means, after we're done. But without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to Kimber, and I'm going to share my screen again, and then we can do demo things. Cool. Awesome.
Wonderful. Thank you, Spria. So I am here to tell everyone about our advanced Intel suite of features that's coming up in Q1 of 2023. And this includes 3 features that we're adding on as a part of our like threat intel concept. Even though we're anti-threat intel, we're going to give you this next level of data to really start pivoting on your investigations. So this includes IP similarity, where you can proactively uncover reconnaissance scanning and actor infrastructure. So this helps you identify tool sets, actors, infrastructure, botnets, all kinds of stuff. We are also exposing IP geodestination, where we tell you the location of our scanners. And so you can use that to narrow down where scanning activity is happening. And in addition, one more, the time series, where we identify patterns in IP scanning behavior. So what this means is we tell you the time that things happened. So the timing of when an IP address got tagged, if it changed user agents, what ports it's scanning. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Supriya.
You got it.
Dive right into the live demo of beta features. So bear in mind, these are in beta. All right. So if you follow me on Twitter, you saw me majorly nerd out about this yesterday, and it's been this very fun thing that's been haunting me for a minute, because it's what happens when you start diving into our data. One of the things that I see most often when I look at our data set is Mirai, obviously, and this device upgrade that is associated with Zycel router worm. I still never know if I say that correctly, but basically router upgrade vulnerability, remote code execution, super cool. So that's one of the highest networks that we see, like the highest number, highest membership. So it's a really good example for IP similarity. This is an IP address that I pulled from that set of addresses. And if we hit this search for similar IPs button, we get all of the similar IPs back. And right now we have a list of 57. And on the right-hand side, we have the score that's associated with that similarity. And this similarity score is made up of these 12 different fields that you see expanded here. The ones that are lit up are the ones that match. And all of these factor into the score, but the ones that match are the most important ones, obviously. And these fields include the identification data, like the operating system, the reverse DNS, the more unique data, web paths, user agents, fingerprints, and the Boolean values, like, is it a bot? Is it on Tor? Is it part of a VPN? Or is it spoofable? So on this one up here, we're just going to go with this top sample, and we're going to compare it to our original IP address. So over here in our original IP, we see this unique port of 37215 that's associated with the Zycel vulnerability. That's the port that they need to hit. And to do that device upgrade, we see a somewhat unique user agent down here. I'm going to scroll a little farther. We don't have fingerprints, but we do have a reverse DNS pattern. So on this highest matching IP, we also see that unique port. We see the device upgrade. We see the similar user agent. And we do see a similar pattern in the reverse DNS. So if we actually take a look at that full list, since this is a router vulnerability, we should see a lot of telecommunications networks in this IP set. We can sort by IP address and take a look at the different organizations. And we see Wireless Logic Limited, Telekom Austria. We go through the list even farther. Vodafone is one I recognize, TeleAsia. So these are all telecom providers. One very familiar to us is T-Mobile. So if you look into this router, it's primarily used in European telecom providers, and it's pretty old at this point. But I believe that vulnerability is from 2017. So this is still being used to add those devices into the Mirai botnet and whatever the latest variation spin is on it. And these are the ones that we're seeing in GreyNoise right now. So our use case for this that we're seeing with our users who are testing, you could potentially use this to do a proactive block list and say, I want to see all the similar IPs because this is the one that hit me. We see that this one has the full set of tags. So that means that we've seen everything from it. If we search for similar IPs, these ones in the 90% range may hit future tags. They may be tagged as Mirai later. So you can just get the jump on them. Yeah, that is IP similarity. lots of fun to just go through and get in a total rabbit hole, identifying botnets, actors, infrastructure, and the scores that seem to have the greatest reliability are above the 90%. We're pretty confident in that stuff. You can click through and really see the similarity. As you go lower in the scores, the variation in what fields match changes. So on this one, let's just check what the lowest is. We get different web paths and user agents, I would assume. Yeah, this one hasn't hit quite everything yet. There's also a Huawei vuln that this network hits, and it hasn't hit that one yet. As we can see, that path is missing. So, yes, brought to us by the awesome data science team at GreyNoise, and we are definitely always making this algorithm, I think is the appropriate word, better and better, the data model. So we have people testing. Yes. All right, next feature, that is IP similarity. I will address all questions at the end. So next feature, I'm just going to use this IP address that I've been showing off here, is our data timeline. So this is a tab in the IP details page where you can see what the IP address has been up to for the past 30 days. I believe we're going to expand this to 90 for launch, fingers crossed, if our pipeline can handle it, which I think it can. So with this IP address, we can see in the last 30 days, it's been consistently hitting this router worm, which makes sense. It would want to check for new members to add in every single day, but it doesn't hit this Huawei tag every single day. So we're not always checking to add in Huawei devices to that network. We can see that it got turned off for a minute. So that's interesting. And it doesn't hit that port that's associated with the router vulnerability every single day. So one of the things that I assumed when I started working at GreyNoise was that IP addresses would be much more consistent than they are. This one is a good example of a consistent one that's probably on a cron job, but let me just pull up something from today. Let's see what this IP address got up to. I like clicking on the malicious ones because they're usually just doing more. We can see that this one, a little inconsistent, 2 days off, 1 day, a couple days off. So it just gives you more context to what the internet is really up to at certain times. If you have a certain benign actor that's taking a look at you every day, you can tell like, hey, I see these actors like every Thursday, and you can use this to validate that GreyNoise also sees them every Thursday, for example. Yeah, this is a great example of a very consistent benign actor. Research scan. They're benign, they're a university, they're doing research, and super consistent. So that is our timeline feature. Yeah, like web archive, but for IPs. Both of these features, IP similarity and timeline, are available via API as well. And this last feature I wanted to show off is our destination countries. So these are where our sensors are located when the source IP address hits them. So this isn't like IP resolution. This is like our metadata from our sensors that we're exposing to you. So you can be certain that that's the country that it hit. And this is a GNQL search. So we most recently deployed sensors in Poland, given the situation. And if we want to see IP addresses that have only hit Poland, we can change that single destination Boolean to true. And our destination country is set to Poland. And we can see that we've got 13,000 IP addresses that are only hitting Poland. And of course, Russia's in the top there, which differs from the internet as a whole, which is interesting. So this gives you even more context into your investigations. If you're into this kind of thing, if you're an international organization that may want to know more about what IP addresses hit your devices in certain countries, this should give you that context. And One of the other things we can see with this is IP addresses behave differently. So some only hit a couple of destinations, some hit 6, some hit just 1. It's a little bit all over the place. So we give you that. And that is a GNQL search. So GreyNoise Query Language Search. I think that is it for now. I see some
Amazing.
questions.
Yes, we've got a ton of questions. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to finish the presentation portion, and then we'll go through all of these questions at the literally very end. It will be a photo finish.
Continue.
Amazing. So just kind of like wrapping up, if you are a customer, hopefully you have heard from our amazing CX team who should have reached out if you had expressed interest about these types of things. And we have quite a few people that are in early access testing right now. I'm sure they're in contact with Kimber. If you are not and you'd like to be, I know we're kind of like through the testing period, but if you feel very strongly, I'm sure we can squeeze you in. So please reach out to your respective rep. For VIP users, we know a lot of you guys are also in early access testing. Michael set up time to talk later and get some feedback. So we hope you can join us for office hours later today. No sweat if you can't, but please make sure that you're continuously delivering feedback and testing these awesome features so that we can continue to make improvements, incorporate them into the final rollout. And so community users, if you fall into neither of these previous categories, hang tight. All of this stuff is coming in Q1 of next year. And we're rolling out even more things beyond what we showed today that we're very excited about. So if you have questions, again, you can reach out to the community team or any of your respective GreyNoise contacts. Final thoughts, our R&D team / data science team sent out a survey to a few folks. It was not a phishing request. If you did happen to get the email, it was from our R&D team, who's very interested in hearing about the value that you're getting out of GreyNoise. I have the form here. I'll forward the slides to anyone, but we'd love if you filled that out. You also get a very beautiful and custom GreyNoise mug, if it works. Awesome. And great, so I will stop here. We can go spend the next 5 minutes answering questions. For folks that have to drop on time, we so appreciate it. Feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll be sending out the recording, or we're happy to spend more time one-on-one answering questions. But without further ado, I'm going to start reading them off, and panelists, feel free to just jump in and answer them as you feel comfortable. So our first question says, does IP similarity use web paths with parameters even though they are stripped in the viz?
They use the viz version of the web paths. So that's done, I believe, to keep things consistent. Those parameters they introduce a lot of variability into that hashing. So similarity, you wouldn't get as much similarity, but I see Dan Grant, our wonderful data science human who developed this in the chat. And if maybe he's listening and hearing the parameters.
Awesome. I'll let Daniel add his follow-up message.
I'm like looking at the chat. I'm staring at the chat intensely. Dan, hop in on that.
Awesome. So the next question is, does GreyNoise provide a method of correlating potential internal sensor downtime with the time series data?
This is something that we're realizing as we're exposing that data and really staring at it a lot, is we have to be so much more proactive about letting people know when we identify internal sensor downtime. So that's something that we in the past have communicated out to users when we notice, a big one, and we have to take the responsibility of, communicating enthusiastically when that could be a possibility. So I can see that you will probably hear from GreyNoise more when we experience blips, even down to the provider level, is what I would like to provide to people, because we should have the best data integrity possible for our users. So that is a wonderful point, and I want to include that feedback. So email me, tweet me, put it in text format, by all means.
Awesome. So the next question is question for the data science team. The amount of underlying data must be massive on a scale that's hard to imagine. How much data is collected per day? If I were to download today's data as a JSON or XML, how big would the download be?
I mean, only gangsters do that. You have to use Parquet, guys, going seriously. But it's actually quite, man, the day-to-day data, like a given day's data, is generally something that you could fit on any one of your hard drives right now and go do that. I don't have like it's variable. So what I can promise you is I can give you I'll drop it in community with what kind of the trends are for that on a regular basis. So I'll give you a more detailed answer than one, but you could absolutely, if you know just a little bit about working with data, absolutely work with a single day's data, but JSON would not be the way to do it. You want to use Parquet or some other cool fancy data science format.
Next question is there a list of all the possible destinations?
There is. It is on the IPGeo docs right now. And I will drop that link in the chat.
Next question is, for the similar IPs page, is there a plan to have those available for export?
Yes, this is coming. This is coming within the next month for those of you that are on the early access testing. So that is very important. You can do it now, obviously, via API and pipe everything to your own JSON file because those results are returned in JSON, but we're going to have JSON and CSV export in the UI.
And finally, is there any work being done to allow tagging API requests to GreyNoise? Example, a hospital could tag their request with healthcare to ultimately help GreyNoise show attack patterns.
This is an interesting question. I want to know more about this. I will say there are things in the pipeline that could fit this for sure, but I want to know more.
Yes. So if you were the person that asked this question, our product team is in a constant discovery mode and would love to talk to you more. So I highly recommend reaching out and we can connect you for further brainstorming session.
Yes, please get in touch with that one. I believe there are things very relevant.
Perfect. Cool. And we're at time. I'm going to keep going on questions. If you have to drop, thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate your time. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. So again, this has been Open Forum. We do these a couple times a year. If you enjoyed it, I hope you'll join us again next time and stay in touch with us on Community Sock. Thanks, guys.